especially because they were very entrenched in their ways. So it's difficult. It's difficult to be a disciple of the Lord. And I think it's a true testament to the underdog spirit in Christianity that says, no, I love you. I'm going to sacrifice my own body. I'm going to risk myself because I know now that in order for us to go to heaven, we need to go through Jesus Christ. He is the way. And it goes all the way back to Eden, the garden, when our first parents decided that they wanted to be equals to God and ate the forbidden fruit. You know, this pride that we have comes from desiring to be equal, which is why yesterday I talked so much about the Greek mythology. They didn't really want to worship. They just wanted to tame because they wanted themselves to be gods, which is why they were excited when they thought gods were in the flesh, because this meant equal. But the disciples knew there is no equality. There is one way, and that way is through Jesus. That's the only way. And as Christians, we need to share with the world this love of God through maybe not our mouths. Maybe we're not Paul and Barnabas and we're going to go and, do apologetics. That's this particular brand of, ministering. But maybe it's through our self-sacrificing love. Maybe that's how we do it. Maybe we are the people that show the world with examples of our good deeds, of our generosity, of our willingness to forgive time and time again, of our willingness to be the underdog. Good morning. And I know I haven't been here in a while. There's some days you just get like these dry spells where you're like, meh. But, in life, you can kind of start to feel sorry for yourself when everything isn't going right. And you're like, well, why bother? And I think I was going through why bother phase of my life. But, sorry, it's wiggling. I'm back. Today's readings were interesting to me, especially like that first reading where, people had written in a complaint because some men showed up, claimed to be apostles of the Lord, and started to preach about, you have to be circumcised and you have to do this and you have to do that if you want to be Christians. And they started to impose very difficult restrictions on, being a follower of Christ. So they went and they, the people believed the Holy Spirit was working, and yet men tended to put on these extra layers and make it a little bit more challenging for them. And that reminds me so much of why I absolutely love Catholicism, okay? These early Christians, they were the first Catholics. Remember, the word Catholic simply means universal. We were all meant to universally worship Christ. So, but these first men, Peter and Paul specifically, because they were the two pillars of the church at the time, had to sit there. I mean, it wasn't like Jesus gave them a roadmap. I mean, Jesus is like vague and yet very specific at the same time. Even his message today, is like, I'm not calling you slave, I call you friend. That means so much. I mean, when you hire a person to be maybe like your maid, you can be cordial and friendly and kind, talk about your day, they can tell you about their day. But when you got business, you go upstairs, you close the door, and you get your business done. You don't let them see everything that goes on in your household. And that's a slave, a maid, an employee, so to speak. However, when it's a friend, that friend knows all the intimate parts of your life. And Jesus is very specifically, saying, I call you my friend. You know what I'm doing, and I expect you to do what I'm doing, to love to love the way I love, to love, which means forgive all the time, which means mercy when things aren't always going your way, which means sacrifice. Love is most specifically sacrifice. And so Jesus, he gave us these great pearls of wisdom that are so easy to understand. But when people start converting, how do you get them to interpret them in the way that he meant? That's why I love my Catholic faith. Whenever there was a problem, even from the beginning, they would convene, they would discuss. For them, it would take a lot longer than us because, it's not like they had a post office or email or texting. So it probably took them years to make a decision, right? They would convene and get together and talk about, this is the problem that we see. Let's go back to the Jesus. What would Jesus do in this situation? And you had to do that when the original apostles were around. You couldn't do that when the original apostles had died, because now you're just sort of interpreting. So to kind of create a structure required very intelligent, organized, and humble men. It did, absolutely. And the account of people who walked with Christ, people like his mother Mary, Mary of Magdala, the different people he met along the way. That was important, because what they're doing is they're building the structure that we now know. And so they had to look at what the Pharisees had done and the laws and the requirements that they had to put on the people. And they had to strip it apart into what Jesus was saying, because they are not just slaves of Jesus, they're friends of Jesus. And the Holy Spirit guides them and inspires them. They are special. They are the priests, the first priests of our church. And, power corrupts. I just think of anybody who gets a little bit of power, and I think about these people who love Jesus and they go around and they're preaching, but then they start to add a little bit of themselves into it. Why? Well, because I'm powerful, because I know something you don't know. And that's a problem. We can't sit there and add or take away from what Jesus told us, because Jesus is perfection. And it takes very special people a very long time to come together, to open up the documents, to analyze, to debate, and to remember what the apostles wrote. That wasn't something you could just do. You don't just on a whim say yes or no. Because remember, Jesus said, make your yes say yes and your no mean no. So the early Christian church, as they were beginning to form the structures and the laws, the canon law and the catechism that we have today, it was because of the first reading. It was because of Paul and Barnabas and Peter and the apostles. It was because of them. We wrote these documents, right? They were figuring it out. The catechism, that's what Jesus taught. We can't change it. Now, not to say that there won't be priests who do. I've had many a priest in confession, when I confess, tell me I'm fine and I didn't sin, when I know straight up I did. Maybe they did my penance for me, I hope. But at the end of the day, if it's in the catechism, I can't change it. However, today I have to love everyone. So I also can't be snarky. I can't point fingers. I can't do the hellfire and damnation. I can walk with people, but I can't change the catechism. And I can't pretend that I can change the catechism, because those are the teachings of Christ. Now, the canon law, it's a super big book. It's how we take the catechism and we put it into action in our world today. Okay? So every time new situations come up, like there was nothing about abortion really in the catechism, because thou shalt not kill. Everybody thought that was normal. But when abortion was legalized, well, that was put into canon law, and then it was added to the catechism as an extension, because they always assumed people would say, we don't need to kill. And we're not going to kill our babies. That's ridiculous. That is a life. until the laws passed, and the Catholic Church then had to reconvene and go, okay, this is bad. What do we tell our people? We tell them it's a sin. It's wrong. That's what we do as a church. We don't make these quick decisions, because if one person had all the power, then that one person could destroy us. Rather, the church is there to protect the teachings of Christ. The Pope is not our king. Our king is God in heaven. The Pope is the captain of the guard. He's the one in charge of protecting the church, helping us to interpret what it means. So yeah, Jesus is our friend. Glad I have Jesus in my life. But the church is our friend too. It may seem cold sometimes, some of the rules and regulations. But if we didn't have it, without rules, we'd surely run into chaos. Rules keep us safe. I couldn't imagine driving around without traffic laws. I couldn't imagine living in a world where murder was legal. I'm grateful for the laws of Christ. I'm grateful for the laws of the church. I'm grateful that I don't need to always interpret the way I see it, that I can go back to them and I can figure out what Jesus wanted and why. So, go out and sacrifice yourself in love. And if you have questions, turn to the authority.